Welcome back everyone, thanks for joining me again. Today I want to cast a light on a perfume that was launched in 1988 with a very sort of tragic story behind it. It was released by a woman called Mira Takla. But before I do that, it's important that I sort of examine where we were in terms of global consciousness at the time. The 1980s saw a sort of Art Deco revival. The first time that those sort of Art Deco themes appeared since the 1920s, and we saw it in our architecture, in jewelry design, fashion, and even graphic design. And along with that came a renewed interest in ancient Egyptian themes. If we think about the 1920s, the Art Deco era, there was that renewed excitement of ancient Egyptian themes then when Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb. We saw a similar kind of surge in the 1980s, and that was off the back of a new wave of spiritualism. Sort of this whole idea of divination, tarot cards. There were people who were interested in ancient Egyptian themes and motifs and mythology. They were wearing ankhs and things like this. And it even pervaded popular culture. MTV was telling us at the time to walk like an Egyptian. So it was quite prominent in our global psyche. Now, Mira Takla, as a perfumer, she was also a Cairo-born Egyptologist, and she worked on many digs and archaeological sort of areas through Egypt. She actually discovered perfume formulas written on temple walls in Edfu and Dendera in Egypt, and she made very meticulous notes on these formulations. She then decided she wanted to take one of these perfumes to market, despite warnings from some of those more conservative Egyptologists that she should probably leave well enough alone, that these perfume formulas are meant for kings and queens only. That aside, she did decide to bottle it. She made the fragrance called Valée des Rois, Valley of the Kings, and it was produced in 4 different bottles, which were all beautiful. This one here in lovely turquoise glass is sort of reminiscent of an ancient Egyptian bust or idol wearing a gold sort of, I guess, ceremonial necklace. Wonderful packaging and wonderful idea. Now, Mira Takla decided in order to launch this fragrance, she needed to create a PR event that would be unrivaled by any other. So she spent $1.3 million back in 1988. That was a lot of money. And in doing that, she wanted to set up this 5-day excursion for select beauty journalists that were flown in from the UK. She'd planned on taking a 5-night cruise down the Nile from Luxor to Aswan, where she'd hired an island in the middle of the Nile, and she and her PR people had hidden bottles in the bulrushes for the beauty writers to discover. There were 24 writers who had come from England in total. This was then going to sort of culminate in a phenomenal party at the Grand Marriott Hotel in Cairo, where the guests would be lavishly given wonderful gifts, including bottles of the perfume. However, just 4 hours after the beauty journalists had arrived and checked into their hotel at the Sheraton Heliopolis in Cairo, a fire broke out. Now, it was a piece of fabric over a canopy that had caught alight from a fire pit, from an ember that had just floated onto it. And with the fanning desert flames, it pushed the fire towards the hotel where 1,300 people were in residence at the time. Now, this is obviously a time before smoke detectors and fire safety measures that we have in place nowadays. So pandemonium broke out. The setup of the actual building meant that people had to jump from windows to try and save their lives. The fire was enormous, and unfortunately, after the flames were finally brought under control, they had learned that 19 guests had perished, and 3 of them, in fact, were part of Mira Takla's beauty journalist team. She was devastated. She was so heartbroken that she felt responsible for these people's lives, and she became a bit of a recluse after that. Not many people have heard from her since. It is a sad story. It's a tragedy, in fact. And those Egyptologists stepped forward and said, "We told you, don't touch the perfume of the pharaohs." They believed it was cursed and that Mira Takla had tampered with something which was meant only for the ancient royal dynasties. I don't know what you believe, but it's an interesting story anyway. As a result, the shelf life of this fragrance was very short indeed. It had just been taken to market at Harrods in London exclusively and at Galeries Lafayette in Paris exclusively. But as a result of this awful tragedy, they decided to strip the shelves and take the bottle from the market. It is therefore a very rare collectible, and people are purchasing it for the perfume, which I'll get into shortly, but also for the story behind it. It is a tragedy. It does make a very interesting keepsake, and prices are pretty crazy on the internet if you take a look. Anyway, that's the Mira Takla tragedy. The fragrance itself, though, it's a real pity it never really had a longer shelf life, because it might have rivaled the greats. It has wonderful citrus sort of top notes and dense, heady white florals in the heart. There's Tuberose, Ylang-Ylang, Jasmine, there's neroli. It's a wonderful sort of bouquet garni of white florals and rose and sandalwood, and that's sort of steeped over vetiver and a really lovely oriental base including Olibanum and Benzoin. There was Styrax and Patchouli. The sum of these perfumes has that incredible kind of presence and projection akin to something like Vintage Poison by Dior. It really does have that wonderful opulence that you would expect from something for kings and queens. But alas, it wasn't meant to be. We now look back upon that awful time in the 80s with a pang of sorrow in your heart, not only for the people who lost their lives, but for the woman who wanted to cast a light on these ancient Egyptian dynasties who felt responsible for their deaths. We also lament the loss of this fantastic scent. Only a few bottles have survived to today, and they are coveted and rarely sprayed from. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little highlight on a perfume tragedy. I'd love to hear your comments below. Leave me a comment and tell me what you think. If you've smelt the Mira Takla fragrance, what your opinions and thoughts are. I'd love it if you'd hit subscribe or share this video, and you'll be advised when I upload new material. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.